In the summer of 1971, a man in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was working on his 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner. He was a machinist by trade, a man who worked with a micrometer and a lathe, someone who didn't believe in theories, only in things he could measure. Every time he pulled up to the local filling station, he would reach into his glove box, pull out a small, flat tin container, and drop 3 small white tablets directly into his fuel tank before inserting the pump nozzle. His friends laughed at him. They told him he was falling for snake oil. But his ledger books didn't lie. His Roadrunner ran cooler, his spark plugs came out clean and free of soot, and his fuel economy was averaging nearly 4 miles per gallon higher than any other Roadrunner in the county. One weekend, he pushed the machine too hard during a drag race and burned a hole straight through a piston. He spent his Saturday tearing the engine down on his workbench, replacing the piston, and putting it back together. His friends assumed that would be the end of the white tablets, but on his very next fill-up, he dropped 3 more tablets into the tank. He didn't care about the failure. He knew he had pushed the engine past its mechanical limits. What he cared about was the fact that the tablets worked. In October of 1973, the Arab oil embargo hit. Almost overnight, gasoline prices jumped 45%. Lines at the pumps stretched for blocks, and the federal government began rationing fuel based on the last digit of your license plate. Suddenly, millions of working-class Americans were desperate for any way to stretch a gallon of regular gasoline. But when they went to their local farm co-ops and auto parts stores to buy those 63-cent boxes of fuel tablets, the shelves were empty. The products had been quietly pulled, the manufacturers had been forced into bankruptcy, and the patents had been bought up and locked away in corporate filing cabinets. They didn't make those tablets vanish because they didn't work. They made them vanish because they worked too well to be allowed to exist. To understand why these fuel savers disappeared, you have to understand the business model of the major oil companies in the mid-20th century. In the 1950s and the 1960s, the oil industry was spending millions of dollars advertising premium, high-octane gasoline. They wanted consumers to believe that regular gasoline was inherently dirty and inefficient, and that the only way to protect your engine was to pay a steep 9 cents per gallon markup for their premium blends. But a small, independent chemical company in Shreveport, Louisiana, called Gulf Tex Chemical, was selling a product called carbonite. For 63 cents, a driver could buy a tin of 36 tablets. Dropping 2 of those tablets into a tank of cheap, regular 87-octane gasoline instantly modified the combustion characteristics of the fuel, allowing it to burn with the efficiency and cleanliness of premium, high-octane gas. To a corporate executive, this was a direct threat to the bottom line. If a driver could get premium fuel economy from a 63-cent box of hardware store tablets, the oil monopolies stood to lose billions of dollars in premium markups. So they didn't fight the tablets in the laboratory. They fought them in the patent office. Beginning in 1963, 3 major chemical companies with deep licensing ties to the major oil refiners began filing overlapping, highly aggressive patent claims on every conceivable formulation of naphthalene-based fuel treatments. They didn't do this to bring a better product to market. They did it to create a legal minefield. By wrapping the technology in a web of patent restrictions, they made it legally and financially impossible for small, independent manufacturers like Gulf Tex Chemical to produce or distribute the tablets. By 1967, Gulf Tex was forced into bankruptcy. At the liquidation auction, their inventory, equipment, and formula documentation were purchased for a mere $11,000 by a shell holding company. When you trace the ownership of that holding company, it leads directly back to one of the very chemical conglomerates that had filed the defensive patents in 1963. They bought the technology, locked it in a drawer, and let the market forget it ever existed. The chemistry behind those lost fuel tablets is actually quite simple, and it relies on basic thermodynamics, not magic. When gasoline is sprayed into an engine's intake, manifold, or carburetor, it is atomized into tiny liquid droplets. The efficiency of your engine depends almost entirely on how completely those droplets burn before the exhaust valve opens. In a standard engine, the surface tension of gasoline is relatively high. This means the fuel droplets sprayed into the cylinder are relatively large. Only the molecules on the very outside of the droplet can react with oxygen during the split-second combustion event. The molecules trapped on the inside of the droplet don't have time to burn. Instead, they are swept out of the exhaust valve as unburnt hydrocarbons, the black soot on your tailpipe, and the wasted energy you paid for at the pump. The active ingredient in those 1950s fuel tablets was 99% pure crystalline naphthalene, a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. When dissolved in gasoline, naphthalene acts as a powerful surfactant. It drastically reduces the surface tension of the fuel. When that treated fuel is sprayed into the engine, it atomizes into microscopic droplets that are a fraction of the size of standard fuel droplets. By shrinking the droplet size, you exponentially increase the surface area to volume ratio of the fuel mist. More fuel molecules are instantly exposed to oxygen. When the spark plug fires, the combustion is faster, cleaner, and far more complete. Instead of throwing 15% of your fuel out the tailpipe as unburnt hydrocarbons, you extract the maximum thermal energy out of every single drop of cheap gasoline. The oil companies knew this. Their own laboratory technicians had documented the physics of surfactant-modified combustion in peer-reviewed journals, but they couldn't patent a basic, widely available chemical compound like naphthalene, and since they couldn't own it, they had to bury it. When drivers realized that these commercial tablets had disappeared, many tried to replicate the trick using standard household mothballs, and this is where the legendary mothball myth was born, and where many classic engines were ruined. If you go to a hardware store or a dollar store today and buy a box of standard mothballs, you are highly likely to destroy your engine. Over the decades, chemical manufacturers quietly shifted the active ingredient in household mothballs. Instead of using pure naphthalene, they switched to a cheaper synthetic compound called paradichlorobenzene. When paradichlorobenzene is dissolved in fuel and burned inside an internal combustion engine, the intense heat of combustion breaks the chemical bonds, releasing chlorine. That chlorine immediately reacts with hydrogen in the combustion chamber to form hydrochloric acid. This highly corrosive acid travels past your piston rings into your oil, eats away at your valve seats, and instantly degrades the delicate platinum and palladium coatings inside your catalytic converter, turning your exhaust system into a melted, restricted mess. Furthermore, modern retail mothballs are packed with cheap wax, binders, talc fillers, and chemical fragrances designed to keep them solid in a closet. If you put them in your gas tank, those binders will not dissolve. They will settle to the bottom of your tank, clog your fuel pickup screen, and destroy your fuel pump. They took a simple, elegant chemical solution and made the retail equivalent highly toxic to your machine, ensuring that the average do-it-yourselfer would get burned if they tried to bypass the system. But the resourceful mechanic doesn't rely on retail products. He relies on first principles. And the truth is, the thermodynamic benefits of the lost fuel tablets can be understood through the lens of fuel chemistry, specifically how polar solvents interact with nonpolar gasoline. At a molecular level, gasoline is a mixture of hydrocarbons held together by weak van der Waals forces. When a trace amount of a highly polar solvent, such as acetone, is introduced to a nonpolar fuel, it disrupts these intermolecular attractions. This molecular disruption directly alters the physical properties of the liquid. It lowers the surface tension, allowing the fuel to vaporize much more rapidly. When the fuel is atomized, the droplets are significantly smaller, creating a dramatic increase in the surface area to volume ratio of the fuel mist. In a laboratory environment, chemists and fuel engineers have documented this exact phenomenon. Research published in peer-reviewed journals, such as the American Chemical Society's ACS Omega, has measured engine performance using trace polar solvent blends on dynamometers. The data confirmed measurable increases in brake power and volumetric efficiency, alongside a significant reduction in carbon monoxide emissions. These studies validate the exact thermodynamic principles that independent mechanics and machinists observed decades ago. By modifying the physical properties of regular 87-octane fuel at a molecular level, the combustion event is optimized, allowing the engine to extract maximum thermal energy before the exhaust valve opens. When you look at the meticulous records kept by those old-school machinists, you realize they weren't guessing. They were documenting the laws of physics. The people who run the energy monopolies want you to believe that you are completely dependent on their high-priced, highly regulated systems. They want you to believe that the only way to get efficiency is to buy a brand new complex vehicle loaded with digital sensors, or to pay their premium prices at the pump. But the green ledger books kept by a machinist in Tulsa 50 years ago prove that the working man was never the fool. He knew that with basic chemistry and a clean set of wrenches, he could outrun and outmaintain their entire multi-billion-dollar system. They took the tablets away because they couldn't control the man who used them, and understanding that science is the first step toward taking back your mechanical independence.